We carved our names in desks that no longer exist, in a wing that was torn down before we were born. The ink bled through wood like memories bled through sleep, and the world outside went on, not knowing we were missing. There are horror games that scare us, and there are horror games that mourns us. Heavenly Host Elementary School is not merely a setting, it is a wound in the architecture of reality, a place where the building itself has learned to suffer. Abandoned schools occupy a unique territory in psychology of dread. They are spaces designed for most fragile stage of human life, childhood. The corridors were built to hold laughter, scraped knees, and chaos of recess. When that purpose is stripped away, what remains is not emptiness, it's expectation. The building still remembers what it was meant to contain, and so, when we walk its halls in the dark, we are not afraid of what we see. We are afraid of what space still believes should there be. The school does not need ghosts to feel cursed. The ghosts only make explicit what the architecture already whispers. Corpse Party understands this better than almost any horror game ever made. The school does not need ghosts to feel cursed. The ghosts only make it explicit what architecture already whispers. That childhood innocence, once corrupted, does not simply vanish, it curdles. It stains the walls. It becomes a part of the load-bearing structure. This is deeply rooted in Japanese ghost story tradition. The Keidan, the Onryo, the vengeful spirit born to a location by trauma. But Heavenly Host is not merely haunted. It is alive with grief. It feeds on it. The school is a living wound that never closes because the trauma that created it was never witnessed, never acknowledged, never mourned. The floor didn't just crack because they are old. They cracked because they are trying to speak. It is easy to mistake Corpse Party for a game about dying. The title alone invites assumptions. The imagery, separated limbs, blood-slicked hallways, and the weird sounds of something dragging itself through darkness certainly suggests a preoccupation with the mechanics of death. This is a misleading one that the game deliberately invites and then systematically dismantles. Corpse Party is not a game about death. Death in this world is almost mercifully quick. What the game truly exposes is everything that surrounds death like a moth. Isolation, regret, loneliness, the slow dissolution of friendship that once felt eternal, and the cursing of weight of survival when others do not. Consider the structure of narrative. The characters are not separated by narrative convenience, but by emotional necessity. The horror does not come from when someone dies. It escalates when someone is alone, when a voice calls in dark corridor and receives no answer, when a friend was just beside you and now space where they stood is only air. The death functions as consequence, not spectacle. The central horror is not about the moment of dying, it is the moment of realization that you are still alive and that survival has made you a complicit in a tragedy you cannot understand. The game forces us to inhabit survivor's guilt, not as a theme, as an atmosphere. The very air the character breathes, every step forward is a betrayal of those left behind. Every moment of safety is stolen time. A single desk in an empty classroom, on it a child's drawing, crumpled and smoothed out again. The drawing is of a family, One figure is stretched out with such force that paper is torn. To discuss Sahiko Shinozaki as a villain is to fail her twice. She is introduced to us through the language of horror, the vengeful child ghost, pale and bloodied. Her laughter echoes in the halls where no child should be. But if we look past the grammar of monstrosity, we find a grammar of suffering so absolute that rewritten her entity. Sahiko was not born as a curse, she was made one. Her suffering was specific, historical, and real. She was a child, experienced violence at the hands of the adults who were meant to protect her. Her death was not an accident, but a accumulation of betrayals layered upon betrayals. And in the logic of heavenly host, where traumas become geography, her pain expanded until it consumed the very space she died in. But the tragedy deepens. Sahiko doesn't merely suffer, she suffers alone, and in that isolation, she has learned to manipulate others into sharing her fate. Not out of malice, but she has forgotten the connection can exist without cruelty. She has been trapped in a loop of grief so long that grief has become her only language. She is not evil. She is a child who was never rescued, never mourned, never allowed to stop being afraid. And so she makes others afraid because her fear is the only intimacy she remembers. To fear her is understandable, to pity her is inevitable, but to understand her is recognizing that vengeance, when pursued by a child, is not justice corrupted. It is innocence itself twisted into a shape that survived in a world that never offered protection. A yearbook page, faces began to blur one by one, as if being wiped away by an invisible hand. The names beneath them fade to illegibility. There is a particular terror that Corpse Party wields with surgical precision. And it is not the fear of dying, it is the fear of being unmade. The game's most devastating narrative turns. The characters do not simply die, they are erased. Their friends forget them, their families never knew them. The photographs that once held their faces become blank pages. They become missing persons who were never missing because they were never persons to begin with. In Corpse Party, to die in Heavenly Host is to risk a second death, the death of memory. And this second death is in many ways is more absolute than the first. A ghost at least is a form of persistence, but to be forgotten is to return to nothing from which we came. This mirrors real human dread. We build momentum, keep photographs, tell stories, not to merely honor the dead, but to reassure ourselves that we too will be honored. That our existence mattered enough to be recalled. Corpse Party strips away that comfort with methodical cruelty. It suggests that the universe is indifferent to our suffering, but actively hungry to consume the evidence that we were ever here. A child's handprint on a folded window. The hand is too small, the print is on the inside of the glass, but the window is 3 stories up. There is a reason why child ghosts disturb us more profoundly than adult ghosts. It is not merely the corruption of innocence, though that is a part of it. It is the recognition of children that in their powerlessness representing something that we all lost, that belief that the world is fundamentally kind. An adult ghost might be angry, vengeful, tragic, but an adult had presumably some fragment of understanding of cruelty. A child did not. A child ghost is the image of mind that encountered horror before it had the language to process it. And so the horror became its language. Corpse Party understands this implicitly. Its spirits do not attack with calculated menace of an adult predator. They attack with inconsistency, the emotional volatility, the desperate need for connection that we associate with children. Sakiko does not kill because she wants to. She kills because she does not know how to ask for help anymore. This creates a discomfort that lingers beyond the game's runtime. We are not merely afraid of these ghosts, we are saddened by them. Our sympathy turns into terror not because the ghosts are evil, but because we recognize the powerlessness to save them and the same powerlessness they felt in life. Years later, the game remains efficient because it does not rely on the shock of gore or the startle of jump scares. It relies on slow, accumulating weight of watching innocents try to survive in a space that was built to destroy it. A cassette tape turning slowly in the dark room. The level is handwritten and faded. Class 2-9. Static begins, and then voices, distant and distorted. If we were to dissect the game's technical elements, we would find much to admire. The sound design, weird footsteps in an empty corridor, the distorted cries of children that seem to come from inside the walls, the ambient hum of building that should be silent, the visual storytelling, which uses limitations of its pixel art to suggest horrors that high definitions could never render as efficiently. The negative space, the unseen. But these are instruments, not the music itself. The true strength of Corpse Party is sadness, a sadness so complete that it becomes indistinguishable from dread. The game does not want to make you afraid of turning off the lights, it wants you to be afraid of lights that were never on. The places we loved as children were never really safe as we believed. Our friendship, however sincere, were always fragile against the weight of time and trauma. The horror is emotional because it's personal. The school is not an alien environment, it is our own school, seen in half lit of memory, where corridors seem longer and shadows seem deeper than they ever did in daylight. Slow return to a classroom, desks in row, a window with rain streaming down. The camera moves towards blackboard, where faint chalk marks are visible, names barely legible, written in a child's hand. There is a particular silence that only exists in an empty classroom. It is not the silence of absence, it is the silence of waiting, of a space that has never accepted its abandonment. The desks are still arranged for students who will never return. The chalk still holds the ghost of lessons that were never completed. The rain against the window sounds like fingerprints, tapping for entry, tapping for attention, tapping for someone to remember that this room was once filled with voices. We carry our childhood with us, but we do not carry them intact. They erode, the names fade, the faces of the classmates become indistinct. We remember the feeling of the place more than the place itself, and somewhere in that erosion, we lose the version of ourselves that existed there. That smaller, braver, more fragile self who believed in the permanence of friendship and the safety of the school hallways. Corpse Party does not haunt us with monsters. It haunts us with the recognition that we all, in some way, already attended Heavenly Host Elementary School. That we all walked the corridors where lights flickered and shadows seemed to know our names. That we all have lost friends to time, to distance, and to slow forgetting that is the true engine of grief. The game haunts because it is honest about what we lost when we grew up. Not innocence exactly, but the belief that our connections were strong enough to survive the world. And so, in the end, Heavenly Host is not haunted by ghosts. It is haunted by the memories that were never allowed to die, by accumulated sorrow of children who were hurt and then forgotten, who called out and were never answered, whose names were written in chalk and then erased by hands that were never knew them. The school doesn't want to kill you, it wants to remember you, and in remembering, it makes you a part of its endless, moaning architecture, forever.